Welcome to our information session. This is one that we try to do the first week of school, and we get students that are taking an intro class or have just graduated or graduated last year, like you, Lexis, and now have decided they want to do social work, and they go, "Okay, let me know everything I need to do because I've only got 4 months to get everything done." And so, one of the purposes of this information session is to hopefully help those of you that are kind of new to the social work interest area and let you know what you're going to need to do, especially should you want to apply for this January. So that's one point of emphasis in this information session, that will give you enough time to get everything done that you would need to get done. So my name is Gordon Lim. I'm the director of the School of Social Work. We also have Nancy Schumpert, our graduate secretary office. She's our graduate specialist, knows all things MSW. And so I'll kind of go through the first half of this presentation, and then Nancy will pick up the second half. So I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you through this PowerPoint that we usually use as we talk to students to just make sure we're giving you all the information, we're not missing anything. So one of the things that you'll notice about this first slide is the 2 points of emphasis of this program, and that is clinical work and research. So, most schools of social work, you go to almost any school of social work, and we have to give you half of the same type of thing, depending on the type of program you're getting into. But what we try to do is try to do these two things really well. So for me, Alexis, this is similar. I went to BYU back in the day and graduated in psychology. Knew pretty much when I graduated that graduate school was going to need to be an option. There's some jobs out there for social science majors with an undergraduate, but I knew if I was going to support a family that I probably needed to go on to graduate school. So I started to look at different programs, looked at marriage and family therapy, looked at clinical psych, counseling psych, school. I was even looking at seminary, and I had a friend that he and I grew up in Vernal together, and we were roommates for our first semester here at BYU, and then he went up to Utah State and got his degree there. And we were talking, and he said, I'm going on and I'm getting a master's of social work. And I really didn't understand what he was saying, because I thought a social worker was a child protective service worker, that it was just a title. He said, no, I got a BSW, and now I'm going to go on and get an MSW. And that was kind of my first introduction to social work. That it was actually a degree, and you could do all these. He was telling me all the different things you could do with the degree. I had been working with some troubled youth. I'd done a little bit of a kind of an internship, so to speak, took some time off and worked at Anasazi in Arizona with some troubled youth. And then later was able to get a job at UVU working with school delinquent kids, kids that were struggling in school. So I had a really big desire to work with that population. He was saying social work is a great option if you want to do that, or if you want to do other things. And so, as many of you are looking at different options as far as what you're going to do with your life, whether you choose social work or not, I don't think our goal is to convince you to do social work, but we definitely say social work is among a number of good options. Psychology has some good options, family studies, family life has good options, sociology does, public health. A lot of our sister programs, there's some great options out there. But many of you have not done as much, especially because we don't have an undergraduate program here at BYU. You don't know as much about social work. So let me tell you just a little bit about what social work is, what social work does, and what makes us a little bit different and similar to some of the other professions that we call sister programs. So social work was founded in the Hull Houses of Chicago. So one of the things that makes social work unique is a group of women had desires to make a difference for people that didn't have a voice, that were disenfranchised, that needed help. And so it began with community organizing, with what can we do to advocate for these groups that are disenfranchised. And that's kind of the basis of how social work came about. Again, it doesn't mean that psychology or sociology or any other program doesn't do that, but social work was founded in poverty, in how we can help those that don't have a voice. And for many people, that's a big draw to social work, is this founding principle of what can we do to advocate for those that don't have a voice. So as you look at kind of the mission, our mission fits, and we've seen just, the last 6 months, a lot of emphasis with the Black Lives Matter movement, with what can we do to be a more inclusive university, to care for those that aren't cared for oftentimes. And social work is very much along those lines. Now, one of the cool things that recently happened a couple of years ago, one of our professors, Stacy Shaw, as we were thinking of putting paintings or something in our along the kind of the walkway around social work, we're on the second floor of the JFSB, we decided, what can we do that's a little bit unique versus just having kind of a cool picture of Mount Timpanogos or something. What can we do? So she came up with this idea and talked to an author of, how about if we take the 6 values of social work and kind of put them to an original light-themed painting. And so these are what we came up with. Commissioned a painter in Heber to kind of do these. So with light being a theme, and as you can see, service, social justice, dignity, competence, integrity, relationships, all of those are the core values of what social work is all about. And so as you kind of walk around our area, it's kind of cool to see the symbolism of how each of those is represented in the depictions of those paintings. We're very proud of how that turned out. One of the pieces that makes social work unique is our perspective. So as you look at what social work emphasizes, what we do as far as training, we cover 2 kind of theories and perspectives. One is called the person and environment. So for social workers, there are different specialties that you might get when you get become an LCSW, but the training at the master's level focuses on the person and the environment. So as you think about somebody that's struggling, what social work is going to do is we're going to look at all these different environments, all these different systems, and how can we impact and improve these systems to help this individual or this family. So as you kind of look at this diagram, you've got the individual, we're going to look at the family, we're going to look at the community, the larger social environment. And so ecological systems theory looks at all the different systems that are in play and how we can either manipulate or strengthen or take away these negative or strengthen these positive influences for this individual or this family. So that's a very prominent theme of how social work functions. Psychology has a little more, oftentimes, micro focus. Sociology is maybe a little more macro focus. And we have kind of a bridge in the way we look at these issues. The other thing that I love about social work is when I do research, and whenever I read a research article in social work, we're commissioned, we have to have an implication section. So I do my research, we find all these really interesting findings, and then I have to have a section that says, okay, how can a social worker take my findings and improve practice? Whereas, in some of the other professions, they are probably even a little more academically rigorous than us, but they don't have that, okay, now what piece to their research. And I love how social work requires us to say, let's take a shot at seeing what we can do to make a difference and improve people's lives. Social work, the other piece, as I mentioned earlier, social work is about a ton of different areas. So pretty much wherever you find people with challenges, you're going to find social workers. That's a good and a bad thing, because the training is more generalist. You're going to get training across a wide range of different areas. Whereas if you came and said, I really want to work with couples to improve a marriage relationship, I'd say, if you want to do that, the training that you're going to get in a marriage and family therapy program is going to be much more depth than what we're going to give you. Social workers do marriage and family counseling, but the training is broader. And so depending on what you want, this is a good barometer for you as each of you think about what you're planning on doing. You can kind of go, do I know exactly what I want? Do I want to be specialized in that particular area for the next number of years? And if the answer is yes, then you might choose a different way to go. If you go, I like this particular area, but I may want to branch out, social work would be a definite consideration in that. And so the cool thing about it is, there's just so many. You've got schools, you've got hospitals, you've got therapy, you've got just so many different organizations that you'll find social workers in. The good thing and bad thing is, we're seeing more challenges instead of less, especially with people's own mental health. There's a huge, as far as schools, school social work is one of the largest growing fields right now, as more and more school districts and state legislatures are having to deal with kids with anxiety and depression. And so there's actually a proposal right now at the state legislature. It was not passed the last year, but it eventually will get passed. But the proposal is to have the equivalent in social workers and school psychologists as there are school counselors. So I'm sure many of you met with school counselors, and their focus was pretty much on the academic. Here's all the classes you need to be successful. Sometimes they would have to deal with the mental health challenges, but the proposal is we need more specific focus in that particular area in our schools. We're seeing it at BYU as well, with students having to wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get into CAPS before they could even be seen for a mental health struggle that they're having. And you go 6 to 8 weeks, the problem's either going to be a whole lot worse, or you're going to find a way to fix it, deal with it yourself. And so we're trying at BYU to be a little more responsive as well. And that's where social work can come in. So obviously the job security of social workers continues to go up. The drawback is oftentimes when funding is pinched, social service programs are some of the first ones that go. Unfortunately, because people's struggles, we're going through it right now with COVID, are not decreasing at all. And yet, if the economy does go down, that's oftentimes some of the first services that are gone. Okay, oftentimes we are asked, can I make a living with social work? How much am I going to make? And if you kind of look at this, these are all social workers. So these are bachelor's level, these are master's level, and we even have a PhD, even though the working licensure in social work is the licensed clinical social worker, LCSW, and that's a post MSW. 2 years after you get an MSW, you can become an LCSW. That's the typical way that most people want to go. In psychology, you really need a PhD to do the practice. So that's a good and bad thing. So nothing wrong. I have a PhD. You get advanced training with that PhD, and oftentimes in research, but it's in social work, our clinical practice is at the master's level. And as you think, I would say, around $35,000 to $40,000 is what our average social work graduate of the master's program starts out at. There's a wide range in that, and then it often goes up after you get an LCSW, but give you just an idea of what you would expect when you graduate. The other thing that oftentimes happens is a student will graduate, get a job at Wasatch Behavioral Health or Utah Valley Hospital, make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. And then what they'll do is they'll develop an expertise in a particular area, whether that's marriage counseling, whether that's addictions, anxiety, depression, and they will see a few clients each week on their own in private practice. That's a very common model that you can make anywhere from $75 to $125, $150 an hour doing therapy that way. So it's very common for our students to work full time in wherever, and then a few nights a week see a particular client group to supplement their income. Okay, our program, and I'll give you just a couple more slides, answer any questions, and then I'll turn it over to Nancy. So BYU is a little bit unique in the way we do social work, and it's unique in a few ways. So I did my undergraduate here, as I mentioned, and then I went to the University of Utah and did my master's degree. I had a great experience, but it was very different than if I would have come to BYU. And here's a few different ways. So BYU has a very small cohort compared to most MSW programs. At BYU, we're actually one of the larger graduate programs, but most MSW programs are in the hundreds as far as how many students they have. So the University of Utah, I had a choice. I could go part-time. I could go completely distance. They have now an online program. They have advanced standing. They have just tons of different options and tons of different concentrations. Very flexible in what I wanted to do. BYU's, we admit 40 students. We have a clinical program with a clinical and a research emphasis that's very structured. And so those parts are very different, the experience. We basically tell you, you're going to be in class Monday, Wednesday, Friday at these times. University of Utah had multiple sections I could choose from. So it's a very different experience. You get to know your cohort really well in ours because you're so small, taking all your classes. That's most of the time is really good. Unless you don't like a few people, then it's not so good. But for the most part, it's a very positive thing for our students. And then we do clinical work. We don't do a lot of other concentrations like some of the other programs, but we do clinical work as good as anybody. The other thing that was just really unique about this program from what happened for me is when I first was admitted to the master's program at the University of Utah, we were on the quarter system. So our program actually didn't start till the end of September, but I started the end of August in my internship. So I hadn't even started graduate school and I was doing therapy. And I felt so unprepared, obviously. The most common model in social work is pretty much the time you start classes in graduate school, you start an internship right along with that. BYU is unique in the sense that we make you go really 2 semesters before you do your first internship. So to compare a BYU student to another student at another university is really not that fair because we have basically a year's worth of training before you do your first internship, which obviously agencies love that we have that long 2-semester training model before we even give you your first year student to work in an agency. And so as you look at what makes BYU unique, here's the 3 things. Good clinical training. We have strong research expectations and training in the program, and we have a number of students that eventually want to go get a PhD in social work. Really, you don't need a PhD to do the clinical practice, but you want a PhD if you want to go on and do the research side of best practices and finding out what the best services that we can provide are. And we have a very good placement rate into PhD programs. And then obviously for everybody, how much does it cost is an important part, and BYU has really good financial aid, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The last thing that makes BYU obviously unique is learning about social work within a gospel context. Social work is one of the more liberal fields, and it's awesome to be able to speak about social work in that gospel perspective. It's something I love, but is having taught at 3 other universities is a struggle at most other universities. Okay, as I mentioned, we have 2 emphases, clinical research. Most of our students are clinical. We do have 3 to 5 students each year that come wanting to go on and get a PhD. It doesn't mean if you go the research route that you can't become a good clinician. It doesn't mean if you go the clinical route, you can't go on and get a PhD. but these electives, these 2 to 3 electives that you're going to take in those areas are going to just give you more clinical training or more research training to really help you succeed in one of those 2 areas. Okay? So I'm keeping going, right, Nancy? Okay. So the last couple slides. So over the last few years, our average student got more than $20,000. And when I say more, we're not talking 40, but anywhere from 20 to 25 has been our average for financial aid. That's pretty cool. How that's made up is through scholarships, through paid internships, through AmeriCorps, through graduate assistantships. And so as you look at that, we are very, BYU's tuition, if I'm a student, if I'm paying over $3,000, that's a lot of money. But comparatively speaking, we are, if not the cheapest, one of the cheapest master's programs in the entire country. Then on top of that, being able to give all students that type of funding is unparalleled. And it is just such a blessing that we can do. Our office manager, Charlene Clark, administers AmeriCorps, which is another piece that our students have to do internships, have to serve their community, and thus qualify for additional funding. And then these paid internships, at most MSW programs, you have maybe 5 to 10% of students that get paid internships. So not only are you paying a lot more in tuition, but most are not even getting any money to do an internship. So incredibly fortunate we are at BYU, and it's because we have really good students, and we admit that we're able to do this. Okay. Sorry, I just jumped there. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Shumpert, our program manager for our MSW program, and she's going to kind of tell you a little bit more about the specifics of the program.
Hello, I'm glad you've joined us today. The first thing I'm going to talk about, if you'll advance the slide, Gordon, is our 3 prerequisites. So you can apply to our program with any accredited undergraduate degree, but we do require 3 prerequisites that must be completed before our January 15th application deadline, and with B- or above grades, and within the last 7 years. So you'll need to take, if you haven't already, Intro to Social Work, Statistics, and Research Methods. We have a list of approved classes on our website, but if you have a class that you'd like us to look at to see if it would work, because we do like to pre-approve them, then you can send me the detailed syllabus for that class, and we'll send it off to be approved or disapproved, whatever the case may be. So everyone applies, next slide, Gordon. Everyone applies through Graduate Studies. The new application will open about September 15th, and there's a $50 application fee. And our deadline actually is January 15th at 10:00 p.m. So don't wait till the last second or the last 2 hours and try and complete it by midnight. We want it in by 10 p.m. because our vendor's in Virginia and it's a 2-hour time difference. So that's when their cutoff happens to be. We have about 110 to 150 applicants every year, and we admit 40 students each fall. So at any given year, we'll have 40 new students and 40 second-year students, which gives us a great opportunity to interact with each other and get to know each other and be supportive of each other in the cohort. There's a 3.0 minimum GPA in order to apply, and our average of those that we admit is about 3.7 to 3.8 some years, depending on the year, but we do not require the GRE to apply. So that's a happy thought, right? We also have a very specific statement of intent on our website that we want you to fill out. The grad application is generic for all graduate programs on campus, and they do have a statement of intent on there, but we say ignore that one, go to our website and upload our social work statement of intent. And what that entails is 4 to 6 pages, double spaced, of your response to 5 different questions or statements. So we want you to title those. You can find this on our website. There's a limited amount of information that you can upload to the application in addition to what's already there. And so one of those spaces that we have is for the statement of intent. There's also another page where you'll calculate your last 60-hour GPA. We take that into consideration as well as your undergraduate GPA. And then we have a background clearance section where you just answer a few questions about your background because that later becomes important for your internship placement. We also have, as part of, next slide, Gordon, as part of the application is a digital interview. So once you click on the button that says I'm interested in the social work program, you'll get an email that has the link. So you can open the email and look at it, but as soon as you open the link, then you just have 1 week to complete these digital interview question responses. And then we would like you to submit those, make sure they're done either before or at the same time that you turn in your graduate application. We also like 3 letters recommendation, and we want them from very specific categories, either from an academic setting or a social work setting only. So 2 from one of those categories and 1 from the other category, however you want to mix that up. One thing to remember on the application is that you will type in the recommender's email contact information, and once you press save that page, that person is going to get an automatic email from Graduate Studies, and it's going to give them instructions on how to do it, but it doesn't give them a timeline really. It just says, here's this request. So you need to make sure that you give your recommenders plenty of time to respond, because a lot of them are very busy and they sometimes forget about you, and they sometimes forget about doing this letter. But you can also go back and check in your application as to whether that letter has been received or not. Sometimes we have to delete a person and add a new one because they never respond, or they got sick, or something happens. So you want to make sure you check back on your application to make sure all 3 of your letters of recommendation have been received by the deadline. That's really important, as the admissions committee really looks at those as important parts of your application. Okay, when you send your application in, all you need is unofficial transcripts from everywhere you've been, including if you're at BYU Provo. And then if you're admitted, you'll send official transcripts to Graduate Studies. Also, as part of our application, we'd like you to upload a 1-page resume. Now, there's also a place on the application where you put your employment history, and we also want you to do that. So I know it's a little repetitive, but please fill out just a 1-page resume, because that's all that they're going to read. They won't get to a 2nd page. There's also a section on the application that says additional information and work experience, and it's optional. So we want you to leave that blank. You don't have to fill that out, but as long as you have your resume attached, that will be great. Also, there's a couple places on the application that say, under program information, it says professor and research. We don't expect you to know any professors ahead of time, so you can leave that blank. And in the research interest box, we would like you to put either clinical or research, depending on what emphasis that you're applying to. So that's a simple thing that helps us determine who's research emphases and who's clinical. So we don't have any part-time or advanced standing or online, although some classes are online due to COVID. As soon as possible, we will be back to all just on campus. It is a 20-month-long program, so all of our students enter in the fall, and the 2nd following April, they all graduate. You can be clinical or research emphasis, and we have paid field internships that we help arrange for you once you're in the program. And those add up to about 1,050 hours. We also know that every master's student probably needs financial aid, and so we want everyone to fill out our scholarship application and upload that with your graduate application as well. Again, on our website is our specific scholarship application. And if you're admitted to the program, then closer towards fall semester, we'll send out an email that will invite you to apply to be an RA or a TA, which are paid positions in the graduate program here. Tuition right now is $37.55 if you're LDS, and double that if you're not, which, as Dr. Lim mentioned, is a bargain. If you don't already know that, just compare any other school in Utah or any other state as well. We also require you to put down a $200 non-refundable tuition deposit, and that will be by April 15th. You will find out if you're admitted to the program by April 1st, and then by April 15th, you'll need to put this tuition deposit, and then it will be applied towards your fall tuition. So it's not extra, it's just giving it up front so we can secure your seat in the program and make sure we have everybody coming that really wants to come. So while you're in the program, you will pay tuition 5 times. 4 of those will be the general yearly semester tuition. And then 1 time during spring and summer, you'll pay depending on your credit hours that you sign up for. It's optional to take an elective during spring and summer, so we don't know the exact amount of tuition that will be. But If you take the normal tuition times about 5, that's a good estimate of how much the total tuition cost will be for this program. And a couple of years ago, someone estimated the cost of textbooks, which may be that $800 to $1,500 mark, but who knows how accurate that is. And there's a lot of different ways to buy textbooks or rent them or download them or whatever. So that's just being in addition to whatever you figure out there. We also require at BYU that everyone lives by the honor code and gets an ecclesiastical endorsement. So 2 interviews are required, one with your bishop and one with your stake president. And if you're not LDS, you can interview with your church leader and the BYU chaplain. So it's like endorse.byu.edu is where you go to start that process. It's mostly electronic to set up the appointments, and then they will call you in, maybe to your office or maybe to a Zoom meeting starting now this year, I'm not sure. There's also a document called Standards and Prerequisites for social work students. And this is a place where you'll enter your prerequisites and the grades that you earn. And then also the standards that we expect you to live by while you're in the program, which is being professional and keeping yourself in good mental and emotional health so you're able to handle the stress of this program. And just a few things on there. So if you read those over and check that and sign it, then that's also part of our admissions. So a lot of students always ask me, what are the things you're looking for? How can I stand out as a good candidate? Well, these 5 things are really what the admissions committee is looking at. If you've taken the prerequisites, what grades you got in those, your undergraduate GPA, as well as your last 60-hour GPA, your statement of intent and your video responses help us get to know you and why you want to be a social worker. Of course, your letters of recommendation are going to be really important. And we do like to see that you have some social work experience. Now, whether that's paid or volunteer setting doesn't really matter, and it doesn't have to be a long, tedious amount of things. But we do want to see that you've been in a social work setting and you know what social workers do. So I'm always here to answer questions. You can always email me. I'm not at my phone too much now because I'm working from home sometimes this semester, but usually I get phone calls and I get emails and answer them pretty quickly.
All right. Well, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day on a Friday. And again, let us know if you have any other questions and we'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Take care. We'll see you later.